this is the basis of a lot of my professional speaking engagements. I say, what makes you different as a person is what makes you better. It makes you better in your life, in your business, and in your career. What makes you different as a person is what makes you better.
Welcome to the GTA Advisors Podcast. We interview Greater Toronto Area business owners, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders. Our goal is to bring Greater Toronto Area residents the best advice from our community's brightest minds. Now, here's your host, author, entrepreneur, and real estate innovator, Robert Caruso.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the GTA Advisors Podcast. Robert Caruso here. I'm here with Michel Neray. Michel, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you've helped thousands of people. You've helped thousands of people craft and perform more effective, purposeful stories to become better leaders, coaches, speakers, on and on and on. You've also created a show or event. It's called Momondays. Basically, from what I understand, it's a show mixed with storytelling, personal growth, and transformation. You mix some laughs in there, some music, some conversation, and it becomes one really fine event that a lot of people are enjoying, and from what I'm seeing online, really enjoying. But maybe I'll let you explain a little bit more about that. But maybe before we get into that, Michel, why don't you explain a little bit about you, where you came from, maybe your background, where you grew up, and tell us a little bit more before you get into your work and what you do.
So interesting question to start with, and thank you for asking. I come from a point of view that we all do what we do professionally because of our backgrounds. So I'm no different. I grew up in Montreal. I now focus on two areas which are related, and we were talking about this before you actually started the camera. But I do Momondays, absolutely right. That's something that I started a little over 5 years ago, and I started it on a whim. We'll get back to why. You'll understand why I'm saying this in a minute. I started that on a whim, but now we're in 14 cities across Canada. We're starting to expand into the US. It's fantastic. So I do that, and that's kind of like my public persona. I also help companies, corporations, organizations figure out what their core differentiation is. What is their unique value proposition in the market? So what makes them different? And the interesting thing is, so professionally, I grew up through the advertising world, had my own ad agency for a while. And my clients kept on asking me, Michel, how is it that you came up with our point of difference so quickly? And for the longest time, I'd shrug my shoulders and say, I don't know, it's just what I do. I mean, have someone ever given you a compliment, Rob, and your natural reaction, you shrug your shoulders and you say it's nothing?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we all do it. It's normal human reaction. I was no different. I wasn't really placing any value on it, but I kept getting that question or that comment over and over and over again. And I started thinking about it. So, well, maybe there's something special about the way I do it. And that's what led me back to this point. Now I'm answering your question. How, my upbringing. I grew up as a little French Jewish kid in an English Protestant school in a French Catholic province in Montreal. Mm-hmm. Didn't matter what group of kids I hung out with. I was always the odd kid out. And I was also a shy kid, very shy, painfully shy. And so we know kids like that. Maybe some of our listeners were shy kids. It's not uncommon.
I was.
You were.
Still am.
But we all deal with it differently. And I think it's the mix of how we were brought up and the unique circumstances of being brought up in a certain way, and that really informs and influences who we become as adults. And so I don't know what got into me or whatever. Well, I kind of do know. Go back even another generation. My mother, Holocaust survivor, spent a year in Auschwitz. My father, Iranian Jew, and joined the French Foreign Legion during the Second World War. So my own upbringing was influenced by the experiences of my parents, who were persecuted because they were different. And I think, obviously, it sounds like the pieces fall into place so perfectly when you look at things in hindsight. But I really do believe that that made a huge, significant, and fundamental impact into who I was as a kid. So here I was, a little French Jewish kid, growing up in an English Protestant school in a French Catholic province. And like I said, didn't matter what group of kids I hung out with, even amongst my Jewish friends in my little neighborhood, here I was, they say, oh, you speak French? Are there Jews in France? Or they say, yeah. And all of their grandparents sounded like they came out straight out of a Woody Allen movie, with that Eastern European Yiddish accent. And my grandmother was French from France, and my father was Persian, it didn't matter what, nobody could understand me. And you think a little shy kid would do everything in his little power to blend in, to not stand out. But it's not what I did. To my French friends, I spoke English. To my English friends, I spoke French. To people outside my little community, I made no bones about the fact that I was Jewish. And what happened was, and again, I say this with the benefit of hindsight, what happened was I started just being almost defiant about whatever part of me that was different. And I started appreciating the uniqueness that other people brought to the party. And so now, 30 years later, my clients tell me, Michel, how did you get to our difference so quickly? It's almost like I had an intuitive sense that it just so naturally to me that I wasn't even placing any value on it. But that was what they were picking up on. And do you think that maybe there was a link between my upbringing and the skill, the natural skill that I brought to bear in my professional life 30 and 40 years later?
That's incredible. What an incredible story.
Thank you.
You must have had, I know you talked about some of your challenges. You pretty much answered a lot of our questions there, but is there any really big challenge, especially with Momondays? I mean, let's talk about Momondays. So was there a really big challenge that you had to overcome to start Momondays or to get it going?
Yeah, there was, and there still is. And I think when you meet a challenge like that, and I don't think I'm very different from other entrepreneurs. I'm afflicted with the same degree of insecurities and self-doubt as everybody else is, and or I don't know, maybe more. I am continually battling the self-doubt demon, and when you're starting your business or you're in business, everybody's got an opinion and everybody thinks they're right. and they might be. Who knows? They might be right. But sometimes you're just drawn to do something, and in my case, launching Momondays in the first place, people would ask me, like, why are you doing this? My wife would say, why are you doing this? Like, why? And 5 years ago, and when I started Momondays, believe me, the furthest thing from my mind was that it would be an international or coast to coast operation. Like, hello? I would have thought you were like, come on, like, serious? And I just did it because I was filling my own need. I wasn't trying to, I didn't do any surveys in the market. I didn't try to pinpoint a gap in the market that I wanted to fill. I was doing this because I wanted to do it. And what I found in my work, because don't forget, I'm no different from a lot of other entrepreneurs. And in my work of helping other companies figure out their point of difference, I realized the same thing. We don't do things, most of us, now we find all that logic and research to back up our intuition or what we want to do ourselves. We do that. It's not a totally undisciplined, I'm going to do this today because I want to. But almost all the time, that spark, that idea of what do I want to do begins with, well, if it were me, what would I want? And so when I started Momondays, and I don't know if this is going to answer one of your other questions, but when I started Momondays, I'd already been a professional speaker for 15 years. I have done my share of association events, of networking events, of formal speaker events, you name it. I've gone to all conferences where I was both a delegate and a speaker. I had it up to here with networking events where it's just about giving and getting business cards. I had it up to here with association events where everybody tries to be so professional and everybody tries to pretend they're more successful than they really are. Right? You've been to those.
Too many.
Yeah, we all have. And my wife and I had gone to stand-up comedy, and I love stand-up comedy. But at the end of the night, I look at her and I said, "Well, that was a laugh. What were we laughing at?" To me, it just felt like, laughter porn. It was empty, great, cathartic. I love it, and I still go. But there was something about it that was missing for me. And I've been to a lot of more meaningful, transformational events, but my God, they're also expensive. They cost thousands of dollars. They take several weekends, and everybody has to cry. And it's like, don't want that either. Mm-hmm. But now, again, I say this with the benefit of hindsight. But if I tell you that I masterminded this or I strategically did this, well, I'd be lying. But in hindsight, I could tell you that all of those things were kind of picking at me. I just didn't like it. But there were elements of them that I liked. I liked the social aspect of networking events. Obviously, I like events that help me build my business. I like the meaningful aspects of the transformational or the more meaningful events that I went to. I love having a laugh like anybody else, the stand-up comedy. And I think when I said, okay, I'm going to do my own event, and the first one was a disaster, 17 people, half of which were the speakers, and the other half was a serving staff, disaster. And 3 months later, they kicked us out because we weren't bringing in enough business. But that gave me enough experience to tell me what I didn't want. I didn't want people practicing their sales pitch. I wanted it to be fun. I didn't want it to be overly serious. I didn't want anybody selling crap at the back of the room. Now any speaker who speaks at Momondays actually has to sign an agreement that I won't sell from the stage. We're tired of it, don't want it. We want to hear stories that really are reflective of the real you. Much you asked me when you started this, we'll get into the business later, but tell me a little bit about you personally. Because in the end, Rob, that's who we care about. We do business person to person. And even though sometimes I joke at Momondays and I say, put your business cards away, it's amazing how much business transpires at Momondays because people connect human to human first.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the start. That was really the genesis of Momondays. And I started becoming more consciously aware of what I wanted and what I didn't want. And that's when we started putting in some of those formal policies in place, like no selling, no preaching, no teaching. Oh, God, we had enough of those. Please, none of this motivational hack stuff. I've seen that for 30 years. Don't give me that. But tell me a real story that had an impact on you that might be inspiring and motivational to other people. Great. Do that. And we mix it up with music, and we bring musicians in, and we have a comedic feel to it, so it's fun. We don't even we actually, in our internal language, we've struck the word event from our vocabulary. We call it a show because that's what we're putting on for people, and it makes all the difference in the world. When as event producers, we say we're putting on a show. It's not a networking event, it's a show, and people come, they have a good time, and it's meaningful, and it's fun, and they make business connections. Holy cow, who could ask for more?
Can you maybe get into like what it's about? Like, obviously there are performers, right? What is it all about? I know that people are putting on a show, they're speaking about themselves, but what is it really like?
Well, in the core, people usually starts around 5:30 or 6 or 6:30, depending on the licensee, what they want to do with it. Mm-hmm. Generally, there are 5 to 7 performers. Sometimes we start off with music, and the MC comes on, much like a stand-up comedy, warms up the crowd, introduces the first speaker. Speaker will share a story. Then 2 or 3 more. Sometimes the stories are about something very dramatic or traumatic, and how they got through it, or this big challenge. Sometimes, and in those cases, it may not be a story that I personally would have had experience with. I mean, sometimes the stories are quite deep and traumatic and intense, but we balance it off with sometimes, life lessons, they're everywhere. Sometimes this little thing that made a big difference in my life, I could share that with an audience and everybody would be going, wow, wow, you're right, I never realized that, or that's so cool. And sometimes we have stand-up comics on stage to to balance it off. But I always say them, share a real story about something that yourself, but they really know how to get the laughs. We have a good time, and then we mix in a performer. And I tell even the musician, and I tell the musician, they can go hear a concert of yours anytime. But if you also tell us the story of how you wrote that song, why you wrote that song, the impact that song had on your life, holy cow, now we've taken it to a whole other level. Mm-hmm. I ask my professional speaker friends to come on stage, and I say to them, don't give us the same story that you tell your corporate audiences. Push yourself. Share a story that perhaps you've never shared before. And here's what's interesting, Rob, what they tell me. Because sometimes they think, oh, well, why would I want to speak at Momondays? You don't get paid. It's just a personal story. It won't help me in my business. Well, let me tell you, almost universally, the professional speaker who speaks at Momondays tells me my corporate engagements are now on a much higher level because I've incorporated some of what I learned at Momondays into my professional engagements. It has made me a better speaker. And yes, I get paid more. I get more engagements. I'm more vulnerable. I engage the audience better. And that's the feedback that I get. So it's just all the way around. It's just an amazing experience for the speaker. And it's an amazing experience for the audience, because in the audience, they're used to going to comedy for laughs, to for inspiration at inspirational events. They're used to going to listen to music at musical events, and they don't get this all in one night. Now, there's interesting because Stephanie, our Mo host that we called him, our Mo host from Winnipeg, she said something kind of, I think, really insightful. She said, Michel, we don't know, we do get a few young people out, and we love it when we get them, but we got to tell you, by and large, our audience skews a little bit older than your average bar scene goer. And Stephanie said to me one day, she said, Michel, when you think about it, people who are just like out of the bar scene, only a certain number of movies you could go to, restaurants you could go to, and the number of really, really good entertainment options are limited. They end up being all business events that we go to, social business events. But things that are more social, more entertainment-like, our choices are more limited. And so, you ask me, what happens at why would anybody go? I mean, it's a unique experience, and I could drone on. I mean, obviously, I'm a fan, duh, but it's really hard to explain. You got to go. Or, the way we've grown completely organically. I've never sold anybody on trying to, on becoming, starting a Momondays in another city, sold. They come to me, they said, hey, I was at a Momondays in city X. I love it. I want to do this where I live.
Amazing.
That's how we've grown.
That is truly amazing. Can you tell me a story? Yeah, tell me a story.
Yeah.
Tell me a story of a time when you made a big difference, like you wowed yourself on this difference.
So I'll have to, we'll go, seriously, you ask me that, and my mind goes right away to, I think it was like the first year we were doing Momondays. And there is a girl, I know her, I thought I knew her, I'd worked with her. She used to work for me in my ad agency. And we stayed friends. And she had I really always had a huge amount of respect for her. And, we worked together for over a year. And I thought I knew her well. And she said, Michel, I want to share a story at Momondays. And we talked about it, and she shared her story with me just briefly. And I said, Camille, I thought I knew you. I never knew this story. And she said, I did a really good job of keeping it hidden. And but I'm ready to share it. And most of us think, oh yeah, I've got a story. It would take a little bit of courage to tell. But I got to tell you, preparing for Momondays, that's where the rubber hits the road. That's where the story you think you have is only the tip of the iceberg of the story you really have. And you don't learn it, really. You don't get it at a deep level for yourself until you start peeling back the layers of that story in preparation for Momondays. And that's only for, not everybody tells, a big heavy story, and it doesn't have, obviously it'd be like, oh my God, slit my throat if every single one were like this. But, sorry. But there are stories that, they're important to people. Mm-hmm. And we don't share them lightly. And so for a lot of us who go to Momondays, we want to see that sliver of humanity that we don't often see in the professional world. Anyway, so we're preparing, and we talked a little bit about it, and it, it's not like it was a super heavy story, but she told it really well. It was a great story, and it was really powerful and interesting. and insightful, and it was insightful about herself, and it was insightful about that part of each of us that we have about our own humanity. And after she told the story at Momondays, it was a few days after, she sent me an email, and she said, Michel, thank you for that experience, because I thought I knew my story, and now I really understand myself at a whole other level that I never expected. And it has made such a transformative impact on my life. And I never would have had that if you'd never tapped me on the shoulder here, and because that's, she knew I'd been doing this. We'd go for coffee every once in a while, and I said, Camille, when are you going to go up on stage, And it became a bit of a joke. But one day she said, I'm ready to tell my story. And when I hear stories like that, and when I hear stories of my professional speaker friends who say to me, I took a risk. I shared a story that I never shared before, and now it's made a huge difference in my life personally. It's made a huge difference in my life professionally. And wow. Like, again, I didn't start Momondays for that purpose. I didn't. I just did it because it was something I wanted to do, and I wasn't even clear about my own reasons.
So the fact that people are sharing their stories, they're obviously digging much deeper into themselves to let it out to everybody else.
And I don't, you know what, we're focusing on this, and if people walk away from this interview thinking like all the stories are these big, heavy, it would be wrong. It's the wrong impression, but if 20% of them are like that, then that's huge.
Absolutely. I mean, you're think of the impact that you're having on those 20%. That it changes their lives. I mean, that's such a beautiful thing you're doing. Honestly, it's fantastic.
And it's funny because somebody just started a new Momondays in a city not that far from here, and she was nervous. It was her first one. It takes a unique blend of talents to do Momondays. You need part MC, part speaker, part coach, part counselor, part event producer, all of that stuff. And the day after, she posted on her Facebook with a big headline, Mo Glow. And she said, I'm feeling it. Now I know what the Mo Glow is all about. Because we're spreading joy and happiness in this world. I know that sounds so tacky, doesn't it? But
it's the truth, though.
We are. That's what we're doing. I mean, okay. So Rob, forgive me a little bit, but I truly believe that when people stand on stage and they're sharing their story, you strip away all the labels that we have for each other. Gay, straight, Asian, Muslim, like all the labels, white, it doesn't matter. Republican, when we're sharing a human story, we're sharing a human story. And it doesn't matter who you are. When I see you on stage, I see you as human. And I truly believe that we're doing two things in terms of, making our dent in the universe kind of thing. We're doing two things. First of all, we're bringing all those values that we talk about, like authenticity, like non-judgmental attitudes and tolerance and all of those things. We're bringing those values into the mainstream. We're making them more accessible. And the second thing we're doing is, I think we're doing in our own little way, we are taking little step toward world peace. I mean, my God, if we could all see each other the way we see each other at Momondays. And again, I hesitate to talk about this because people would think that, oh, there's this big, heavy duty mission, enlightenment, and the heavens are going to open up and the sun's going to shine. And it's not like that. If it were like that, very few people would go. Yeah. But the fact that we turn it into an entertaining show and it's fun. People want to come back because it's fun, because they have a good time.
It's amazing. So maybe you can get into that. So why should people come? Obviously, you touched on it, but why should people come? Well,
if anybody's been listening to me for the last, several minutes drone on about it, if that didn't work, then then don't come.
Is there any other reasons?
Find somebody who's been, and say, hey, maybe I'll tag along with you next time. And so here's the truth. We've had people celebrate birthdays. We've had people celebrate engagements, first dates, weddings. We've had corporate teams come and bring their teams as kind of like a motivational perk. Probably the most affordable team builder you'll ever find anywhere because, cost of a ticket, cheap. We've just, come. It's fun.
Now, I know you're in Toronto, you Hard Rock Cafe, but we know that that's closing down. So obviously you're going to find a new venue for that. Have you found one already, or are you still in the middle of it?
Oh, I can't. I'm so excited, but I can't talk about it.
No,
by the time people watch this, hopefully the announcement will be made.
You're also in Aurora, so that's close enough to the GTA. It's I consider it part of the GTA these days, anyway.
Yeah.
Other than that, I know you're in other parts of the country, really, right? So
we're literally from, if you fudge it a little bit, we're coast to coast. We're St. John's to Vancouver.
Amazing. That's
still waiting for Victoria, BC. Then we could truly say coast to coast.
That's amazing. Let's change it up just a little bit. Is there any kind of technology, like any kind of app or any resource that you couldn't live without?
Well, I think one of the things that I've always been on the leading edge of technology in everything I've ever done. Mm-hmm. So that's I don't think I could narrow it down to just one. I mean, when I was running my ad agency, we were, and I say this in all honesty, as best as I could, we were probably the first, if not one of the very, very first marketing companies to embrace web technology. I was building websites. I personally was building websites. I taught myself HTML when Netscape, do you remember Netscape?
I remember Netscape. I am old enough.
It was at V0.9. Explorer, Safari didn't exist yet.
Yeah.
I was building websites in 1993. We built one of the world's first user-generated, content-generated websites in 1994, launched it in 1995. So we made a decision to go completely WordPress about 5 years ago. So I don't know. I mean, we use all the Google services. Mm-hmm. I don't think we could do anything that we do without all these technology things. I'll do a shout out for our ticketing platform, Sparkso.com. A couple of young kids out of California started this ticketing platform. I love it. I think it's brilliant. What else? Asana, project management. I love that. WordPress, already mentioned that. Google services, love them. Mm-hmm. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, it absolutely does. Yeah, thank you very much. This will be a very interesting answer, I know. What book have you read, or is there a quote that you've lived your life by that's helped mold who you are today?
Oh God, I knew you'd put me on the spot. I think there isn't a quote. I prefer to come up with my own. Well, I'll tell you, because this has been, I don't know, okay, this is weird. Now that you mention it, I remember in the very, very early days of my career, my first advertising job, back when they still used wax linotype as real typesetters.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. I'm old. What can I say? I'm old. But I remember going to the print room and asking them if they could do a typeset slogan for me. And I don't know if it came to me in a dream or what, but I wrote two things. Things are different already. I don't know why. Just that was it. And just how life changes all the time. This is why I always get a kick out of people, the 5 keys to success, or here, people break down their success and they say, you must do this, you must do it. Well, that's what worked for you. I can't, people who are, if they're really honest with themselves, there's probably a whole bunch of luck as well that came into play, being at the right place at the right time. And every degree that the world turns on its axis is a different world. So never, ever stop experimenting. Never, ever give up on the value of your own trial and error, because what worked for me may not work for you. And there are certain guidelines, but even, the ones who really make a difference are the ones who, I think do things for themselves and do things, damn the torpedoes, and look everybody in the eye and damn their own self-doubt, like I have to do pretty much every single day. So things are different already is one slogan, and the other thing, and this has informed me. This is the basis of a lot of my professional speaking engagements. I say, what makes you different as a person is what makes you better. It makes you better in your life, in your business, and in your career. What makes you different as a person is what makes you better.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
I really, really appreciate you sharing that with us. I hope people take that and live it.
Thank you.
It was a real pleasure to have you on the show, Michel. It was
thank you for asking.
It was incredible. How can people get a hold of you?
Well, I would love for them to go to Momondays.com, and one day I'll tell you how I got that, how I named the company Momondays. But the domain's available in a whole bunch of countries around the world, and we got them. Momondays.com, and look for a location that is close to them. And if they're interested in starting a Momondays, the link is right there at the top, Start a Momondays. We provide people with all the tools. If they're interested in having me speak to their group or at their conference, then my corporate website, my lastname.com, Neray, Neray.com, Neray.com, and find all the information about my corporate consulting and my speaking engagements. Obviously, I love doing that, and because that is really where you see my professional life and my Momondays. You realize, I think you realize, they both come from the same place.
Absolutely. From what I've seen, and I'm going to have all the links to your websites in the show notes, and people will be able to find you with no problem at all.
Thank you.
I really appreciate you joining us, Michel. This is truly a wonderful experience, and I'm going to be at a Momondays. Absolutely.
Looking forward to it.
All right. Thank you.
Take care, Rob.
You too.
Bye-bye.